Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a great day. Let's talk about something interesting today, which is the idea of the pink tax and how it exists in ways that women often don't talk about and most people don't comprehend. If you're not aware of what the pink tax is, this is a concept that people will talk about from time to time, that basically products marketed towards women are more expensive than their male counterparts. Now, as far as this being an economic reality, the solution would be really simple, which is if the male products are cheaper and are the same, you can just buy those and use them. But the whole idea tends to break down when you actually realize that you're comparing incomparable products. It's like, well, the Just for Men hair color is so cheap. It's like, well, why don't you use that? Well, because it sucks. I want to use the Clariol or whatever it is. I want to use the more expensive stuff, the more expensive hair color. It's like, oh, okay. So you're paying more and you're getting more. That's not exactly a tax for being a woman because you are free to use the cheaper stuff, but you think it's not as good. Same thing with like razors. Women's razors are more expensive than men's razors, but they're more complicated. And you can use a men's razor. I know women that have done it because they don't feel like they need the complicated female razors, but they are more complicated. So it's like, well, they don't work as good. Okay, well, so you're paying more and you're getting more. And this is usually going to be the case pretty much across the board for things. The reason being that if you're offering the same product with two different marketing directions, it's pretty easy for a consumer to realize they're the same and just go over and get the other product. They don't always do that, but it keeps those sorts of differences in check. No, the real pink tax is something that's entirely different and that is almost never discussed. And that is that women have to live a different lifestyle from men in order to be safe. So just as an example, if you're a single woman, you will probably have to spend a higher percentage of your income on your housing. And you are probably going to have to avoid public transport. Let's be honest, right? We've seen videos of women being murdered and assaulted on public transport. If you want to be safe, you have to have your own conveyance. That's an expense. But you also have to have a more expensive apartment or more expensive house, because you have to be safe, because you're much more vulnerable as a woman. So women being more physically vulnerable than men means they have to live a different lifestyle from men. Men can pursue riskier opportunities and men can live in riskier places and be more secure because they are less physically vulnerable. I'm over 6 feet tall. I'm over 200 pounds, right? I'm not as physically vulnerable as a 5'2", 100-pound woman. Obviously, right? So if somebody wants to physically hurt me, they need to be somewhere in the same size range as me, and they're going to be risking harm to themselves, which automatically means that my size alone is a deterrent to a lot of different physical violence, things that could come up, right? No, it's not 100%. Right? And men are usually a lot more happy to carry weapons like guns and things like that. They're more interested in that, which adds another layer of self-security. But the point is, as a man, I am, and I always was free to slum it up a little bit, right? I could live in a really cheap apartment in the bad part of town and feel pretty secure in my person and maybe even in my possessions. So the old meme of like, the man doesn't need as many possessions as the woman. He's happy with just the PlayStation and the TV and the chair in his house, and women can't comprehend this. So we have this idea that women have to live in the better apartment and have the better housing because they're more materialistic and they have to be surrounded by nice things. I think it's actually that they need to be in the better apartment because they have to be safe. And I've known single women in the course of my life that they have basically said that, but it's almost never articulated openly, at least on the internet, because you'll be criticized for being bourgeois or racist or something else like that. But it's a reality. You have to live in a nicer apartment. So you have to live in the nicer apartment for the same reason that millennials have to buy more expensive houses than their parents, bigger houses than what they grew up in. Why? So that you can live in a better neighborhood, so that you are physically isolating yourself from the problems that diversity can bring. So you're physically isolating yourself from the more problematic elements of society, which weren't as prevalent 30, 40 years ago. You could live in a smaller, cheaper house and be less surrounded or less threatened by criminal activity. So if you want your kids to be safe, you have to live in a more expensive neighborhood. If you're a single woman, you want to be safe, you have to live in a more expensive apartment, and maybe you have to live on the second or third floor. I've known multiple women who had stories of people breaking through the glass door on their apartment because they lived on the first floor trying to get at them, and it's a terrifying thing. I've known women who've had men that stalked them try to knock down their front door and get to them, and they were lucky enough that they lived on the second floor and had the door locked, and that person wasn't able to get in. But the fact is that women have to change their lifestyle in order to be more physically secure. That also includes, by the way, not working night shift, right? A man will work a night shift or graveyard shift that pays more money because he is at less risk doing those sorts of jobs. Even if it's like a teller job in the middle of the night, a woman is at a higher risk for those jobs. She's at a higher risk going to those jobs, and she's at a higher risk working those jobs than she would working normal hours. So a woman ends up taking lower pay often in order to work better hours where she's safer and where she has more options for that kind of thing. And men are willing to work worse hours, worse times of the day, more hours in more dangerous places in the city, and live in more dangerous places in the city in order to live below their means and gain more money and get ahead economically. So the real pink tax just has to do with the differences between men and women in a physical way and in terms of maintaining safety for a woman. This is also why marriage is a big boon to women in particular, is that you gain a bunch of physical security, you pool your resources, you're able to live in a nicer place, but also you have the physical security of your spouse who gives you some of that physical layer that men just experience by being men and not having basically having more, shall we say, parity of risk with other men compared to a man and a woman. A woman gains some of that by being around a man. She gains protection from the man. So marriage benefits a woman in a multitude of different ways, but a big one economically are these often unspoken of little differences about maintaining a woman's safety. As the man starts to grant them safety as well as increased income, which allows them to live in a better place, which in turn reinforces that safety, and so on and so forth. So is the pink tax real? In terms of items, not really, in my opinion. But in terms of lifestyle, I think it's a real thing. Why do women have to drive a car to work? Because they can't take public transport, or they might get stabbed to death or robbed or hurt. Even public transport in the middle of the day. My wife was like, well, I'll just take the train from here to there. It's like in the middle of the day. There was like an escaped mental patient on the train that day. And it's like, oh man, I'm never taking public transport again if I can help it. And unfortunately, not everyone has the option, but women will make choices in order to have that security, and that means less money being saved, more money spent on the apartment, more money spent on the car, that sort of thing. The car needs to be more reliable. Men can buy a cheaper car because they feel more confident fixing the car, and they're also less afraid of it breaking down. Now that could be, just some differences in the experiences between the sexes and not the physical differences. But, if you're a man, you're like, oh, I just buy a beater and fix it. A woman's like, I have no idea how to do that, and I'm afraid I'll hurt myself, so I have to buy a better car. And like most married couples you'll meet, who drives the better car? It's usually the mom, right? The wife is the one who gets to drive the nice, reliable car, and the man drives the beater to work because it's cheap and it's disposable and he can fix it and he's not worried about it breaking down in the middle of Compton and him being assaulted, right? So lots of little things that add up to differences between the sexes there where the female lifestyle ends up costing more, totally apart from other things that they tend to spend money on, like makeup, hair, that kind of stuff. Just a different necessity for lifestyle in general. And I think a lot of it comes to do with the differences between the sexes and the need for safety. But leave me your thoughts down below. I'd be interested. Can you think of like a physical item that really receives the pink tax? I know there's like a brand tax, but that's a totally different economic thing to me. I'm thinking like they market it to women and it's the same product. They just charge more for it with like the pink handle on it or something like that. So if you could think of one that's actually what we're talking about, then that would be interesting to me. But I can't think of any off the top of my head. I think they're pretty rare compared to, you know, the real thing. So have a good one. I'll check you all next time. Have a great day. See you later.